Welcome to the Oregon post-game group therapy session. You don't see any Oregon gear here, and it, like the football team, just didn't show up today.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Life is suffering, it is all pain, and everything is terrible all of the time. I am still Spencer McLaughlin. That's Brian Smith of Locked On Seminoles and our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network. His main job today is to stop me from swearing about what we just watched. We keep it G-rated here at Locked On. This is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, by the way, your team every day. Thanks for making it your first listen or your first view post. I don't know, Brian. How are we describing that? Beatdown, throttling, annihilation. I feel like I need to go full Scott Van Pelt in that old This Is Sports Center commercial where he's using a performance-enhancing drug, but it's a thesaurus. I need this thesaurus to figure out how many different words we can come up with to describe what Ohio State just did to Oregon. I mean, I said all week this felt destined to be a close game because on paper it did. And I watched them play the first time. It's one thing. I'm not surprised that Ohio State won the game, Brian. It was 34-0. It was 34-0. Can you find me even the most diehard Buckeye fan in the throes of YouTube comments that had 34-0 before we hit the half, Brian? Can you show me the person that had that on their bingo card? Holy smokes.
In my opinion, the most ridiculous fan base in college football, but they probably didn't have that either. You know what I mean? Like, that was anything that they tried to do. First off, congrats to them. They played great, obviously.
They did.
But anything they tried to do, the Ducks accentuated it with dumb. That would be how I defined the second touchdown for Jeremiah. By the way, he's a great guy. That is one of the worst quote unquote attempts, because there was no attempt.
No, there was no
playing
attempt.
Coverage that I've ever seen.
There was a coverage bust.
I mean, by the way, remember me telling you he will be the best receiver in college football by the end of his freshman year. Remember me telling you? I was not kidding.
You know, I didn't remember that coming into this game, but right as you say that, I now have a recollection of you saying that. And
don't help him.
I give you props.
Don't help him by busting coverages.
I give you props for that one, Brian, because I mean that guy's ridiculous. And
He's
Oregon
ready for
was
the NFL
right now. He's a little older than Ryan Williams, but he's ready for the NFL.
He has to play 2 more years by.
2 more years.
It's going to be gross.
Oh man, it was just so.
Ryan Williams does too, by the way. I mean, it's something of this. If it makes you feel any better, the guy.
But Ryan Williams doesn't feel like he's as good as Jeremiah Smith.
Jeremiah is 220 pounds and runs over 23 miles an hour.
I don't understand how a freshman is that strong, that fast. I don't know. I just anyway. I want to bring this back to Oregon for a moment. I do want to make one broad picture point because this has been a raging discussion throughout the whole entire playoff.
Okay.
The blowouts that took place at the hands of Notre Dame to Indiana and Penn State to SMU served as confirmation bias for a whole horde of people who didn't want to see those teams in the playoff or thought they were overrated. It should have been Alabama, who lost to Michigan.
Michigan once again.
By the way, my hand not being on the same page as where my headphones are located, good microcosm for Oregon's defense here. Nothing is in sync. Nothing. Anyway, so a lot of people were mad that, well, there are these blowout games. There are this. Who's going to go back and retcon to say Oregon shouldn't have been in the playoff? Don't think anyone's going to say that. This is just how college football goes sometimes. This is the way it goes.
It's true. Like, Oregon played its worst game of the year, and you could argue Ohio State played its best, especially like in a 5-minute stretch. And they did it early, and Oregon took a punch to the face, and they barely got up off the mat before halftime. I mean, at the end, you got to give them credit for scoring the touchdown and all that, and that's nice. But their defense was obliterated. And you and I had talked about this after the Penn State game, I said, look, there's something wrong with the linebacker. They can't cover. The middle of the field is concerning to me. And Ohio State just – and then, of course, nobody can cover Jeremiah anyway. But then they had the middle of the field. They killed them.
Yeah,
Oregon has some recruiting things they need to do.
Well, they just brought in the best. Oh man, I hate bringing this up in the post game
don't
here.
Do it. Don't do it to yourself. Don't do it to yourself.
I think I have to, Brian.
Okay, if you want, look, I'm just gonna remind you this later. I'm gonna do it to you.
You're so right. You're so right. But
I know you very well.
I can't even get the words out, man. Okay. Live shows are fun. I'm legitimately trying not to laugh. Oregon just went out and recruited defensive backs in a way that we have not seen them do before. And boy, do those guys need to become studs, because there was a deficiency in the secondary comparison here. I thought Jabbar Muhammad played well. I thought Nico Reed was solid, and Jeremiah Smith is just really good. Everybody else that was in coverage for Oregon, horrifically bad football game. Just bad.
I want to ask you this, because I watch Oregon quite a bit, but you're a fan and you've watched them forever. Have they had a game, just a secondary, forget the linebackers and D-line for a second. Did they have a game anywhere along the season you're like, why are they so out of sync and missing coverages?
Penn State, the Big Ten championship game. It was the biggest thing. And I think that's probably the most frustrating part about this for Duck fans is they had the extra time off to break down what went wrong defensively in the Big Ten championship game. Offense saved them against a really good defense in Penn State, by the way.
They shredded them. They did. They
absolutely shredded him. All the Will Stein slander, it was another bad early game plan here, but where were you when Oregon rattled off 21 straight points offensively against a top 5 defense statistically in college football? You were a little bit quiet in that one. This is just what happens when you go up against a team in Ohio State that has a great defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles and has better overall players. I mean, the biggest gap I felt in an individual position group was what I identified coming into this coming into this game during the week. Biggest weakness, I didn't trust Oregon safeties in coverage. I felt, man, if you have the corners, that's okay. But the safeties, Tysheem Johnson, Kobe Savage, the difference, the gap between those two guys and Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs, I mean, it's a canyon. It's a canyon because they were everywhere making plays. There were no downfield shots available. I mean, Gabriel wanted to take them, but he couldn't take them. There was nobody open. And you would see the replays throughout this game, and you'd see a receiver come open on what would be the fourth progression, essentially, on a play. 1 read, no. 2 read, no. Check down, not really there. Then Gabriel has to drop his eyes because he knows the pocket's eventually going to collapse. This is, the worst the offensive line has played. The game's officially gone final, by the way, 41-21. Oh, man, there's a hilarious stat in there. There's
a bunch of hilarious stats, Spencer.
Yeah. Yeah, sadly. So they haven't tallied up the sack numbers yet, but I felt like the offensive line played horribly in the run game. I did not feel like they stunk in the pass game, Brian. I felt like Ohio State's scheme and secondary was just better. That's what it looked like. This is a great Oregon receiving core. No Evan Stewart, but Justice Lowe stepped up. Like, this was just Ohio State's coaching staff out-coached Oregon. Full stop. That's what I think this comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the stats I wrote down before the game for my cheat sheet, Oregon was probably the best major college football program on third downs. They were just over 50% for the year, blah, blah, blah. In this game, they weren't awful, but it's a little bit jaded because they got some of those starting middle of the second quarter on. They were pretty good, but the first quarter and a half, they were garbage. and they dug themselves such a hole. Obviously, Ohio State had a lot to do with that. But they finished 8 out of 19 for 42%. Here's the ironic part. Ohio State had a low third down percentage. You know why? Because they scored on first and second down.
Yeah, because they just threw it. Every one of the first 3 touchdowns were over 40 yards. And then Oregon gave up a 66-yard touchdown on first down, just handing the ball off to Travion Henderson because
that was a really generic play. And the guy was in position and then took himself.
But that's what I'm talking about.
That's not defensive coordinator. That's player.
100%. And I felt like the Ohio State definitely dominated the trenches going both ways. And that played a significant factor into Oregon's struggles on both sides of the ball. You know, my number one key was pressure Will Howard. They didn't do that consistently. He got to sit back there and throw deep balls. And by the way,
didn't even come close.
The national conversation from myself, others, was Dylan Gabriel's the best quarterback in the playoff. He was not the best quarterback on the field today.
He wasn't even in the stratosphere with that. I give Will Howard some credit. That guy,
a lot of credit.
Of the year to now, just light years.
I mean, he was throwing that second touchdown to Emeka Egbuka. That's not bad coverage. Brandon Johnson's right underneath him. If that ball isn't perfectly thrown, Johnson swats the ball away, but it's perfectly thrown to an NFL receiver. And that's, as I said, coming into this game, that's a cure-all. No matter what advantage you have here or there, if you've got a good quarterback and NFL wideouts, there's nothing anybody can do in the college game.
What do you think Ohio State averaged on third down completions? Just take a wild guess.
Percentage?
Per completion, how many yards per completion on third downs do you think the Buckeyes averaged?
I don't even know when they had a third down. I don't know, 6 yards maybe?
19.
Oh, that's gross.
Here's the scary part. Oregon's is 14.3, and they got obliterated. Yeah.
Yikes.
I mean,
major yikes.
If it makes you feel any better, I was at the Under Armour practice today, and the best DB there is going to Oregon. So, Naeem Offer.
Yeah.
He once today. He was good coverage.
I tell you what.
He will start pretty much from day one.
It felt like he could have started in this game right now for Oregon.
I'm not trying to be mean, but it wouldn't. Yes, he would have. He could have at least played free safety for him or nickel. He can play anywhere in second.
I'm trying to think of an impact play that either Oregon safety made in this game.
They might have. I don't know. We don't get to see the vertical feed. It's not the same seeing it on TV, so I'm not going to say they didn't. Because some of your best plays are when the ball doesn't come your way because you take away the receiver. So
True.
You got to look at it that way.
And I've given them that credit throughout the year when I've highlighted this as I just don't have high-end, rangy playmakers on the back end of the defense with Johnson and Savage back there. And what I would come back to sometimes is, well, they're not giving up the big plays. Well, now they're giving up the big plays, whether it's miscommunication. I mean, this is 2 games in a row. Like, this Oregon defense that had been so good all year just gave up 37 and 41 points to end the season. And by the way, it would have been better if they gave up 50 in the Big Ten championship game. They would have lost, and they would have run into Ohio State eventually, and this might have been played in the national championship game. So, I don't look at it that way. I simultaneously have the thought of, yeah, the playoff seeding is whack. You shouldn't be playing a team this good in the quarterfinal while, you have other teams that are clearly playing easier matchups out there. However, the reason that I didn't talk about it a ton on Locked On Ducks leading up to this game is you want to win a national championship, you got to be able to beat a team like this eventually. I mean, how human did Texas look? Arizona State perceived to be one of the weakest teams in the field. Like, you were going to play one of them. And then on the other side, Georgia, backup quarterback, Notre Dame, like Oregon, has struggled to deliver in big games for the last 10, 15 years. And who else is over there? And Penn State, who Oregon already beat. Like, the other side of the bracket is a lot softer, but guess what? You were going to have to play this team eventually. So anyone wants to go out there and gripe about playoff yes, the playoff format should be altered and reseeded, or there are a number of different solutions you could go for there. However, Oregon's goal was not to get to the semifinal. It was to win the national championship. And they won't do that this year. We're going to keep talking about the game because I have still more thoughts. The most, just the worst stat imaginable.
I don't
the
know.
worst.
I've got some good ones here.
It's not good, Brian. It's not good. Coming up next. First, a reminder, though, this episode, oh, dang it, I'm not as good at directing live shows as I would like to be, but this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, and certainly you don't have to worry about Oregon season betting on that anymore, but you can still get in on NFL regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong, unlike Oregon, with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. You can bet on which players will score a touchdown. Jeremiah Smith would have been a really good option in this particular spot. How many points each team will score? Ohio State over, again, would have been a really good bet. And a lot more, like Ohio State -2.5. All would have been winning bets in this game if you checked out FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and our official sportsbook partner here at the Locked On Network. Continuing on with our Locked On Ducks squad, it's me, it's Brian Smith, chopping it up about... Ooh, boy, that was ugly. So here's the stat, Brian. Have you looked at the box score yet?
Oh, I'm ready. I'm going to challenge you with the next one. You're going to be mad. You may have the same one, but
well, I mean,
got a good one too.
Okay, so when you look, because the box score has gone final 41-21, and yet the game wasn't even that close. I mean, yeah. Oh, it's crazy how that works.
Let's hear it, man. I'm curious if yours is better than mine. Go ahead.
The worst stat in this entire conundrum. Oregon ends the game with -23 rushing yards.
That's pretty bad.
Dude!
Now, what's the sack adjusted? Let me see if I can find that.
I don't have that in front
They
of
had
me.
several. Sack adjusted yards.
Well, actually, yeah, I can count two. So they had 16 rushing yards. 16.
Okay, that's pathetic.
Yeah.
I think yours is worse than mine, but this one's still really bad.
Okay, hit me.
In any game, this stat is pretty telling, but this one's just so lopsided. Total yards on first down plays for the Bucks, 284. Total yards for the Ducks, 101. I mean, are you kidding me? They averaged 10.1. The Ducks averaged 3.7. I was talking about a minute ago, third downs didn't matter. That's why they just scored on first and second down.
That's why I thought the yards per completion on third down was going to be so low.
But the few that they did hit, they hit on those
They
two.
just chucked it down the field on first and second down. I mean, this was...
Jeremiah caught the short one, too. You got to tackle the guy, by the way. That would be helpful. Just going to throw that
This
out
was
there.
copy-paste of the Tennessee game for Ohio State. I mean, literally.
They played a little better because, to be honest, they were more interested in this game. I think it's because they lost to Oregon, which makes sense. Tennessee, they don't have any rivalry with whatsoever. So, but, man, like, trying to think.
By the way, for my Duck Everydayers out there, that is the saddest second segment sip I have ever had.
Well, I mean, it should be. If it wasn't, you probably need something else to be inserted into that sip, but that's another topic all to itself.
You know, I don't really drink, but I have for cooking, I have a bottle of white wine in my pantry. I thought about just bringing it on the show. I mean, the only thing else I have in there for cooking is vodka, but that seems aggressive.
I would rule against that because vomiting is not fun.
Well, so you're right. You're right. Throwing up is decidedly not fun. However, when you are in the throes of such a horrific event, that's the only thing you can think about. So if you're thinking about that, you're not thinking about the fact that Oregon allowed 8 sacks in this game, got 0, and ran on the net for -23 yards, and take out the sack yardage, and boom, you had 16 rushing yards.
I have a
Oh,
question for
man.
you, then I have a question for Ducks fan. and
No,
you can
sorry,
answer
not so sorry. I miss 20 rushing yards. 20 rushing yards. Yeah.
this. Ooh, yeah, big difference. Number one, barring guys turning pro, how many Ducks will return on the offensive line in 2025?
3?
Three. Connerly is one, yes?
No, Connerly's done. Well, okay.
He'll turn pro.
Connerly's not coming back.
Okay.
They brought in Isaiah World from Nevada and Alex Harkey from Texas State. Those are probably your starting tackles next year. So Cornelius is done. Connerly is done. Harper is done. And everyone else can come back. Now, the number is technically 4 there. It's a bit of a misleading number in terms of the number of guys that come back along the offensive line because the guard rotation is unlike anything I've seen for Oregon. I've seen them use a 6th or even sometimes a 7th guy, but Oregon over the last several weeks, we've seen 4 guards play. 4. Struther, Harper, Iuli, Rogers. All have seen the field regularly. I think Rogers kind of fallen 4th into that rotation, but regardless, like I mentioned this earlier. I don't think in pass protection the offensive line was great. They were not as good as they were in the first game. You can attribute that to rust. You can attribute that to law of averages and things balancing themselves out, which is typically what happens at the college level when you have matchups between NFL caliber guys. Because in the first matchup, you've got those great edge rushers, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, and they combine for 0 sacks in the game. Against who? Johnny Cornelius, Josh Connerly, NFL tackles. Well, if you play those games between those caliber of guys 10 times, you're not going to win every matchup. It's just the way it goes. You know, the one that pops in my head with this is last year when current, now former Duck since he's played his last game, Jabbar Muhammad was at Washington. Oregon played Washington twice. Up in Seattle, Troy Franklin got the better of him. Absolutely cooked him. Drew a pass interference, deep passes down the field. Franklin had a huge game. Second go-round, Pac-12 title game, Franklin got boxed in. And so that's just what it looked like to me is Oregon's tackles had the better day at Autzen, and Ohio State had the better day today in Pasadena. So yeah, anyway, that was what I thought on that. But again, I didn't think they were all that horrible. I just felt like there was no one open down the field. You know, going back to something else we mentioned earlier, Brian, I'm sure I'm going to get flooded. I've already been flooded with questions about why did this happen? What's going on? This coaching staff had a great roster, Ohio State. Oregon came in with a great roster. When you get to that point, and I mentioned this on my show earlier this week, this is how it played out. It comes down to which coaching staff has the better game plan and the better adjustments. And that was just Ohio State.
They had both today.
They had both. 100%. That's what this came down to. Because, you know, all offseason, I talk about this team and the roster and where the weaknesses are. And yeah, the safeties were not the best in coverage or tackling or doing anything today. But still on the whole, it should not have looked like that, except Lanning and company got outcoached by Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, who everyone has been trying to write off for such a long time, and it turns out he still does know a little bit of football.
The reason I brought up the offensive line, and I know Dylan from when I used to cover UCF, great guy, by the way. He can win you games systematically, but he doesn't have a cannon for an arm, because if he did, he'd be in the NFL already. He probably made more money this year by playing for the Ducks than he would have in the NFL. I don't know if he'll make an NFL roster. He's unbelievably accurate. But
well, they mentioned on the broadcast, Herb Street and Fowler, that last year he got an undrafted free agent grade.
Did he really?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that he came back and wanted to go to Oregon. I'm sure he's got a slightly higher grade, but I don't think it changes a ton. Look at how many times the ball was batted down at the line of scrimmage.
I'm 5'10", and I look right at him in the eyes.
Yeah.
He's about 5'10". That's the problem. He can't teach height. But anyway, great guy, but he doesn't have a gun. Obviously, he had some knockdown today, and he needs, like, he's very good off play action, waggle, bootleg. To do that, the stat that you brought up a minute ago that was so atrocious is the key. And the O-line got their hats kicked in. O-line got destroyed schematically, one-on-one block, zone block, whatever. They lost, and lost a couple more times. 2nd and 8.
20 rushing yards.
There is no play call for 2nd and 8 that is desirable. That was good scenarios a lot of the time. And like you said, he goes through his reads and understands post-snap progressions about as well, if not better, than any QB in FBS. But if nobody is open, or if it's too late because he's got an NFL defensive lineman in his face, and all 4 of those guys will get paid. Just not even counting some. A couple of the backups will probably get paid too. They're just not getting enough run quite yet to know a lot about them. But anyway, you're looking down at the ground because you're on the ground. You got 3 seconds to get the ball out against the Bucs, or else you're getting smoked. And that's what happened today. And they were on fire, got behind the sticks to help them. It was just a flat-out avalanche. And I bring up the O-line. Like, the Ducks still are really good and offered, and some of the guys, I'll talk more about that on your show over the next probably several months with recruiting. They're doing an unbelievable job. They're still not, from a raw talent perspective, quite where Ohio State is. I know you probably look at
where do you feel like they're missing the most? We talked about the safeties. I see the gap there. That was one of the biggest areas
obvious.
where I felt like they looked bigger, faster, stronger. It is the way that they were able to make impact plays, pop Jordan James in the hole and drive him back, be good in coverage as well. That was one gap. But elsewhere,
there's 2 others. I'm just going to let you try to guess. It's very specific. One I mentioned earlier on the show, and it's obvious.
Defensive line?
Linebacker. They can't cover me. In the middle of the field, they suck in coverage right now. I'm sorry. They got eaten a lot.
But Ohio State, Jay Stevens of
well.
Locked On Buckeyes has said that he's felt that that's been one of the weaker areas for Ohio State's defense this year. Do you feel like their linebackers are significantly better in coverage?
Today, what's his name? Number 0 that was spying and moving. Like, he had his best game I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, he was pretty good this year, but that was the best game. And sometimes that happens, as you noted. But, like, when was the last time an Oregon linebacker manned up somebody and took him away? Penn State game
that wasn't a running back, you mean?
Like, if even then, like, Henderson's not much fun. That guy could fly. But they took poor angles to the ball in the run game, and in the middle of the field, they're just not impactful and taking away anything.
The poor angles.
That's a player.
I still felt like that came from the safeties more than the linebacker.
Oh, I'm not saying it didn't. The safety is blatant. It's blatant. Like,
it was frankly even worse. That was even worse than I thought. It was my top worry going into the game, but I didn't think it would look like that. But
But like
I think Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, frankly, saw the same thing that I saw, which is I think we can exploit these guys. They got exposed.
Yeah. The corners, they didn't like throw short too much except for the one play to Jeremiah doesn't where you throw it. Like, my mother doesn't know which direction the ball should go. She could coach Jeremiah.
Yeah.
But outside of that, like, everything they did was deep and in the middle, and they tried to stay away from the corners for the most part, and they exposed every other player, which means the safeties and the linebackers. And it was repetitive. They, like, I'm telling you, by the end of next year, Offord will definitively be their best DB. And I know Offord because I live in Alabama. I've seen him. You have to see it to understand it. That is a flat-out 3-and-out NFL player.
Well, that would be
That's kind of helpful.
That would be preferable. That would be helpful.
He can play any of the 3 spots in the second. Doesn't make any difference.
It still seemed to me, Brian. I hear you on a couple of the position groups that were different, but Oregon's got NFL guys littered all over the roster.
Yeah, they do.
And
coaching's got to take some culpability here too.
Yeah, I think that this will be something we will certainly continue to discuss as we let the thoughts marinate and analyze all this stuff. But that to me felt more like a coaching difference than a roster difference. That's the way it looked to me. I mean, I watched them play the first time, and Oregon won the game, and Oregon made a bunch of mistakes. Oregon had an interception that didn't get reviewed that they should have gotten that led to the first Ohio State touchdown. They missed a field goal. They missed an extra point, missed a 2-point conversion, and twice inside the 5-yard line came up with 3 points. They did all that and still won the game. So I think the game plan in that game was just significantly better. The execution on the actual day of the game was better. I don't know if it was because of the long layoff. Oregon certainly looked rusty going both ways, but they didn't really find their footing. Like when it got to 14-0, I'm going, okay. Something I told Oregon fans on my show from earlier today. Don't overreact to the first half. That was one of my messages for a better viewing experience. And by the way, I adhered to that as best I could. Even when it was 17-0, I thought Oregon's going to make a run. Like, this is not great, but this is not over. Oregon's getting the ball at half. You can stack possessions. And they ended up going on a 15-0 run. The problem is they were staring at a 34-0 hole. If you had even made that...
If it was 21-0, they had a chance.
A 24-0 hole at the half. Or 24, and then they get that touchdown, and it's 24-8. That's suddenly a drastically different game. But because they just kept having those defensive lapses, I mean... I don't know. We've got more to talk about with that, because I think there is something to it, and I want to talk about the dynamics of they played once and they played another time, and what that means for the staff. That's coming up next. Coming up right now, though, is Rocket Money. So if you've got subscriptions you're paying for twice, you might not know about it. Rocket Money will help you out. Rocket Money is like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings together everything in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So make sure you get your unwanted subscriptions canceled and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So, first matchup, Brian. Oregon comes out and it's back and forth, but the offense is having success, at least in the early going. The defense also forces the turnover, leads to a touchdown, and that play by Derek Harmon in the first matchup was not, Quinshon Judkins put the ball on the ground. That was Derek Harmon just took it away from him. Like, they just looked more ready to go from the jump. And I want your thoughts on the second go-round, but also the long layoff, because even though, all three teams were underdogs coming into this game, for the ones that were off a longer break, they all got off to slow starts.
Well, here's the thing, man. They got off to a slow start. Is it me, or they just kind of look lethargic and almost like shocked when they were down? The second touchdown for a team with a 60-year quarterback, veteran players on both sides, was a little off to me. And I don't have any explanation for that. But the other thing is, name the team that you had multiple key players on your offense, meaning your quarterback and then Jeremiah. Like, once he got assimilated to the offense, it was over for everybody in college football, not the Ducks. The difference between Jeremiah early in the season and Jeremiah tonight is he's now the best player in college football, other than maybe Travis Hunter.
Will Johnson didn't play in the Ohio State Michigan game. How did Smith not have 15 targets?
That really might be the worst coaching job of any major college football staff in the last decade.
It's truly
shocking. Ironic. It's ironic considering how well they prepared for this game. I mean, seriously, not trying to be funny, or like the difference in the two coaching jobs, because you could see the look on Ryan Day's face during the Michigan game. He was scared to death to make a mistake. And so he kept making mistakes. What happens when you play scared or coach scared? You lose. And he did. They had 10 points with Jeremiah Smith not getting the ball. That is criminal. 100%. So tonight he kind of made up for it, because he made sure that they force-fed Jeremiah from the get-go. And again, this just in, 5'10" guys against Jeremiah, bad. Oregon's got to get bigger at corner, safety, etc. They don't have to all be like.
I feel like they need to get faster as much as anything. They just look like they weren't able to keep up in space or make impact plays in the box. Like when Ransom and Downs are in coverage, they can keep up with receivers stride for stride. When they're coming downhill, they fill gaps quickly.
They're
And I
well
just
coached, but
never
they can always
felt,
fly too. I mean,
yeah, I never felt like Oregon's secondary guys had that element. And again, I didn't think the corners in this game for Oregon played poorly. I really didn't. I know that seems strange, but
they attacked the safeties, like you said. First
yeah,
off, and then
in the
linebackers
individual
could help.
coverage spots, there was one, the long, post corner route that Jeremiah Smith ran early in the first quarter, where he goes up and catches the ball. Nico Reed's not in a bad position.
He's just not
Tyson-
Jeremiah Smith.
Right, but Tyson Johnson's coming underneath, and he's dropping back, and he's trying to get there, and he can't time his jump, so he doesn't jump, and then Smith makes a phenomenal catch. Like, I didn't feel like they were picking on Oregon's corners in this game a whole heck of a lot. There were a couple of moments, but that's going to happen.
They tried to beat the safeties. You were right from the get-go in this show.
And by the way, going back to my first key of the game, pressure Will Howard didn't exist. No sacks. No sacks. I credit the Ohio State offensive line because
you give
Jordan
them credit. They've had guys in and out of the line and moved guys around. They have improved.
Yeah,
Fast.
Jordan Birch was there, looked like himself, almost had a sack early in the game. Mateo Uyunglele was there, didn't feel him. Derek Harmon had his presence felt a couple of times. He's about to be a first-round draft pick in the NFL. I think that Ohio State offensive line coach deserves a raise, and he's the unsung hero of these two games.
Crap for a while too. It's so ironic.
Yeah, but I'm looking at what they did against two legit fronts. I mean, you know this front. Tennessee
100%.
and Oregon, those are two of the 5 to 10 best defensive fronts in all of college football. Littered with NFL talent. Oregon's, I think, is better from a depth standpoint than Tennessee's. But guess what? They had time to get the ball downfield to Emeka Buka or Jeremiah Smith. Why? Because Will Howard's just sitting there. He was just sitting there. They could not get home, and what Oregon was able to do in the first game, connect on all those long passes, Ohio State came up with in the second game. And that was the difference, because once they got up, Oregon's offense just didn't have a response. There was just, Evan Stewart apparently got hurt in warm-ups, which, I mean
that's just a bad sign.
It's just a bad sign, to be sure. Jordan James goes out in the middle of the game. But guess what? Neither one of those guys was playing defense. Yeah, I don't really get, like, obviously it could have helped the offense if those guys had been there, but what were they going to do to stop Ohio State from dropping 41 on Oregon's heads?
One of the guys that I know, he played major college football. Leave his name out. He played major college football for a program that everybody knows. And he's a trainer now. And we were talking about a DB once. And he said, Brian, that kid's not that good. He's overrated. And I said, why do you say that? And this was some California kid. He said, he's just playing zone. I'm telling you, down here where we play SEC, if you can't play straight up man, you're not that good. This kid wasn't that big, but he could really run. That's kind of like what I'm seeing like Oregon. They don't have the 6'1.5" corners that can just play cover one, and your safeties can come down in the box and play games against Ohio State. Like the only teams that have had a lot of success against them, you're going to get beat once in a while. You got to be able to play. Here we are, put our butts out there on the edge. Michigan's done it a little bit. Notre Dame did a couple years ago, et cetera. That, and then you can limit some of the safety stuff. But they still need better safeties. They need some more elite, like offered as the beginning of the process.
Well, here's the crazy thing. They're about to lose their top 6 defensive backs from this team.
So
now,
Oregon is not going to go to the playoff based on that. That sounds like a lot. Have you seen their? Have you, Brian? Have you seen their schedule? Well,
no Ohio State, no Michigan.
They got Penn State next year?
They have Penn State on the road. Penn State is off a bye as well. Oregon is not. That is a scheduling
disaster. Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, right. For that one game.
That really sucked. Come on, that's terrible. But anyway,
we'll
talk about that next fall.
It is, but at the same time, I think it's accounting for the fact that the rest of Oregon's schedule ridiculously manageable. They
let you go 10-2 minimum.
Yes, I think so. As of now, a lot can change, but I'd say 10-2 is still within the realm of possibility for next year, and that should probably get you in the playoffs. So The
Tennessee.
the other good thing about the schedule is, this year they almost lost to Wisconsin, and that was their 8th consecutive game played on that schedule.
Yeah, they were tired. They didn't look
Next year they don't have that. They go 4 games by. I need to go back, but there's a stretch where it goes 3 games by, 3 games by, and then the last few games of the year. So it's a lot more favorable. No Ohio State, no Michigan, no Illinois, who could be a really good.
Next year.
Yeah, Illinois could be real. Illinois. I asked our Locked On Illini guy, Sonny Verma, how many guys are coming back. He said probably 17 or 18 starters. I said, what? He goes, yeah, that's kind of where the collective's focus is at. So anyway, they're focused on retention. I agree. They haven't been good in a long time. It's the first time they've won 10 games since 2001. But yeah, so the schedule works out. The non-conference, you've got Montana State, who might win the national championship at the FCS level on Monday. And then we'll have to try to reload, of course. And then you've got Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and then Oregon State, and then a bye. That's September for Oregon. Oregon State hasn't won in Eugene since 2007. Oklahoma State just went 3-9. Montana State really good, but in FCS really good. Now Idaho scared Oregon, of course, and
that's right.
And then you've got Northwestern, who missed a bowl game this year. I'm not all that worried about it. So, they'll start strong, and they should be able. And by the way, yeah, playing Penn State on the road when they're off bye, that's certainly difficult in the context of a season. However, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility Oregon wins that game. I'm not sharping that in as a loss.
No.
I haven't done that since 2022 in the season opener against Georgia. I was like, yeah, Oregon's going to lose this game.
My point is still the same. If you go across the roster, and the Ducks roster as well as anybody, how many guys, man for man, do you think are going to be rounds 1 through 5 across the board? Losing 6 DBs is just insane.
Yeah. Of those DBs, one of them, maybe 2, will be
at an NFL camp or something.
Yeah, I would think Jabbar Muhammad gets drafted. I'm curious to see what happens with Nico Reed. He's a little bit smaller, but Brian, I've watched Ugo Amadi carve out a nice decade or so long career in the NFL. And I mean, Ugo Amadi was fine at Oregon. I did not see him having a 10-year career with as much success. I think Nico Reed is a better player in college than Ugo Amadi was. So 1, maybe 2. Why don't we call it, over-under would probably be 1.5, but I don't think it'd be more than 2 of the 6. Other guys could get camp invites, but yeah, I think that's, based on this game, and frankly, going back to last season as well, it's the biggest area where Oregon has to get better. And the transfer, Jabbar Muhammad, they brought in, who they're going to have to replace, I think he was as advertised this year. I mean, he's the only guy who had a pass breakup on Jeremiah Smith today. He ran with him across the entire field. I mean, it was 1 rep, but gosh almighty, that was the most impressive thing that an Oregon secondary player did over the course of 60 minutes of football. So, yeah, there's a lot. There are going to be a lot of replacements. They brought in Theron Johnson, a corner from Northwestern. They brought in Thieneman, the safety from Purdue. But, I mean, you saw 7-8 DBs play over the course of this year. Oregon has... they're going to have some guys that'll be ready, I presume, but ready to play. I don't know if they're going to be ready to.
I'm telling you,
suddenly become all conference guys.
Alford's going to start pretty quick, ready or not. They don't have anybody like him.
I wonder, because he's a different body type than Aaron Flowers,
he's
right?
6'1", 195, rocked up.
Yeah. And
he's super smooth.
Well, I wonder about it. I wonder about Aaron Flowers as well. I just thought that he was an interesting guy. But Flowers, again, looks like a slightly taller Kobe Savage to me, where he's physical. He can hit guys down in the box, but I don't know how rangy he is on.
See, that's the thing. If you want to put Alford at free safety, he'll play corner, but he can play
Thieneman probably is your free safety. But I'm not opposed to having 2 safeties that I feel like are rangy and can play at all 3 levels, because I did not feel like that this defense had that, and it got exposed for the second straight year against NFL wide receivers.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The only teams like in Ohio State obviously has the best receiver group when they're hitting their A game. The only way you can stop them is to tell them what's coming and playing man and try to bump them and just bring in heat. Oregon doesn't. That's not their thing. And they didn't get home tonight up front, and their scheme didn't work. But I was disappointed they didn't have a backup plan. They could not, like you said, 0 sacks is unacceptable.
I was waiting
Against the
for.
Lions, had changes and everything. That bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, they only allowed 7 points in the second half, right? Because it was 34-0 at the break.
Yeah, that's true.
So the adjustments came at halftime. Yay. That was way
Better than getting
way too
slapped
late.
in the second half.
And by the way, there a thought on the adjustments factor and what Chip Kelly and Ryan Day did here to just throttle Oregon start to finish in this game coming up next. After we talk about FanDuel, because they're bringing this therapy session to all of you out there for the Oregon fans that are tuned in. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Of course, my Ducks are now out of the playoff, and the Seahawks got eliminated from the playoffs last week. Everything's great. I love being a sports fan. It's the best. It's the best. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up W. You can bet on which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more for any game, which Oregon won't play again until September. We have to wait even longer. But life will go on, I promise. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So after the Penn State game, Brian, I noticed a couple of things that Oregon struggled with. Tempo, 3 things. Tempo, motion, and formation shifts.
Those are some pretty.
You know who else noticed that Oregon struggled with those 3 things?
His name's Chip Kelly.
His name is Chip Kelly, and he noticed that Oregon struggled. What was among the most frustrating elements of this game for Oregon fans is not just that another chance at a national championship goes by the wayside, and you got to wait 9 long months for the season to return. I guess technically 8 months, but you got to wait a long time. It's that Oregon has the extra prep time. They hadn't played since early December, and you saw those problems arise against Penn State in the Big Ten championship game, and still, with all that time to prepare, they were still getting run roughshod over by the same stuff. Put a motion, and all of a sudden the communication, it wasn't there. How many times? Blown coverages, miscommunication, don't handle the shifts and motions, get beat at the line of scrimmage, don't tackle in space. It was all the same problems. Problems, by the way, that didn't exist throughout the year. And this is why, I know this sounds cop-out-ish to some people. This is just a reality that you have to unfortunately accept and deal with as a fan sometime. A game doesn't always make sense. It doesn't always make sense. And it doesn't mean that the evidence you saw that goes against the data point you just got what was faulty or was wrong, because there are times where everything does align in the way that you foresee it. But sometimes you go out and you just don't have it. You don't have the right game plan. You can't make the right adjustments. Don't have the right players. I know we've talked about the roster and secondary a lot on this show, but I keep coming back to, Brian, the game plans on both sides of the ball for Oregon, they weren't there. Because if you're coming at it and say, oh, well, Ohio State was just better, their coaching was just better today. Don't tell me that their roster was so much better than Oregon's that they just dominated. I watched Oregon outrun Ohio State in the first matchup, allow 0 sacks, score in every quarter, and play with them start to finish. Don't tell me it can't happen, that this roster wasn't capable of that. They didn't do it today. That doesn't mean they were incapable of doing it. Doesn't mean that you were wrong for getting hopeful about the idea of them winning this game or winning a national championship. It means they didn't do it today, and you reload, lick your wounds, and go back to square one and say, okay, where do we go from here? And that sucks, because we've been waiting so long for this as Oregon fans to have that one season. I get it. I feel it with all of you out there that are feeling the same thing. But as crappy as it is to say, Brian, answer this trivia question for me. When was Jim Harbaugh hired at Michigan?
Hired there?
Hired.
2015, something like that. I don't know what it was.
I believe it is 2015. I thought I had it right off the top of my head, but I wanted to just be exactly sure. 2015. Ding, ding, ding. Brian's a winner. Remind me when he won a national championship?
That would be 2023.
2023, his 9th year. And it's not to say he couldn't have had a chance to win it in a prior. I mean, if
they were close a few times.
Exactly. Like I know it sounds incredibly simplistic. It's just true. This stuff is hard, and things have to go your way, and you've got to come out with the right game plans and the right approaches. And against Ohio State on October 12th, Lanning had the right game plan, the right approach, the right tactics, the right adjustments, and today he and his staff did not.
They got outcoached pretty bad. I need to go back through the film, and the shifts and stuff are one of those things that bothers me. But as Oregon fans know, Chip is really good. Once he sees something and he comes back to it, he doesn't miss very often. He's pretty consistent. The other thing is, we touched on it briefly. Again, Jeremiah, at the beginning of the year to now is light years. And for whatever reason, Will Howard is feeling his oats. Some of those deep balls, you were not going to throw it any better.
No, he was so good, man.
Number 15 in Kansas City would have tipped his cap on some of those throws.
I was thoroughly impressed with some of the throws that he was able to make. And yeah, a couple times he couldn't cover Jeremiah Smith, but I mean, that seam shot to Emeka Ibuka.
Oh, I mean, come on. Yeah. That's an
NFL throw.
Yeah, 100%. If the DB is within a half step and the guy still catches it, you just get mad and you go to the next play because there's nothing else you do. And that's what happened.
And that's one of the reasons that, you know, when Ohio State was scoring early, I was listening to my own advice and saying, you know what? First half, long game. Turns out it was a long game, just in a really, really bad way. But it's the first half, and, you know, Will Howard's making a bunch of good throws. Is he going to do that for 4 quarters? Is he not going to miss for 4 quarters? Well, turns out he wasn't really going to miss. It did shift a bit in the second half, but by then it was too little too late. I mean, Oregon could not tackle in space, have the right coverages, get anything going offensively. That's just bad. Left him doing this. I was just scratching an itch on my head. That just happened to coincide with what the coaching staff was probably doing. I don't know what we're supposed to do right now.
Yeah, Chip ate their lunch today.
Yeah.
First off, and then for all the people that are Ohio State fans that were pushing Larry Johnson out the door as a D-line coach, I'd say he maximized his players' capabilities.
Yeah, and for them to not just have had pressure, but to have also done that. Jim Knowles, the defense coordinator for Ohio State, he was
top 5 in the country.
He was so good today.
Yeah,
so good. 2 reasons why. Number 1, he got pressure on Dylan Gabriel and sacked him. I'd say they sacked him more than they got pressure, if that makes sense. The sack numbers were there, but there weren't that many moments. There were a couple, but there weren't that many moments where Gabriel takes the snap and all of a sudden there's a guy right in his face.
It was 3+ seconds, but they tracked him well after the play, which is good for Ohio State, but you're right.
Yeah, so the ability to get sacks while also getting pass deflections, usually you see one or the other.
They did both.
They did both. I mean, lot.
Their secondary was on fire. It might have been better. But again, because
the defensive line, what I'm talking about is the defensive line got their hands up and just swatted the ball from Dylan Gabriel. They didn't do that in the first game. They did that a whole heck of a lot in the second game. So that's the first reason. The second reason is Oregon's best play oftentimes was call a pass, first read no, second read no, third read no, exit out to the right, scramble drill, throw downfield, which, as anyone who plays EA College Football 25 knows, is incredibly difficult to defend. So Jim Knowles, there was one play in particular where Gabriel got sacked by number 0, I forget his name, for Ohio State.
Yeah, he's really good.
Cody Simon. Cody Simon. He had a heck of a game. 11 tackles, 2 sacks, another TFL, and a pass breakup. That's a heck of a football game. So one of his sacks was a brilliant adjustment that I saw from Jim Knowles, where he knows Gabriel, as a left-handed quarterback, is having a tendency to exit to the left side of the pocket and scramble down the field. That's how Oregon picked up 21 yards on that third and 22, got the fourth down, kept the drive alive, the whole 9 yards and whatnot. So what he did in that is he actually had an 8-man coverage, technically a 7-man coverage, 3-man rush, and a spy. But he took his defensive tackle and he had him slant to the defensive line's right to take away and kind of wall off that side and made Gabriel, a lefty, exit out the weak side where Cody Simon was waiting for him the moment he left the pocket. Once I saw that play, I thought, oh, Knowles is just better than Will Stein today. And I'm not out on Will Stein. Jim Knowles was just better. He outcoached him, you know? I mean, Tom Allen, the defense coordinator for Penn State, I think he's really good. He's had a really good couple of games for Penn State in the playoffs so far. They could very easily wind up in the national championship game on the back of what he's doing there. Will Stein cooked him in the Big Ten championship game. 45 points. Wasn't able to get a stop when he needed to. But today, that coaching mismatch was on the other foot. And Tosh Luploy on the one side has had some great games this year. But Chip Kelly worked him. And head coach, he's influencing a little bit of everything here. I know there's this perception of, Lanning's a former defensive coordinator and Ryan Day's a former offensive coordinator. It doesn't mean they're not chiming in on the game plan for the other side of the ball.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah, like Dan Lanning isn't doing zero coaching of Dylan Gabriel. Like Gabriel talks to Will Stein the most. It's not like he and Lanning don't ever communicate during games, or Ryan Day doesn't ever pull a DB aside and say, hey, when you see this coverage, you got to get, all that sort of stuff. They got outcoached. They got outcoached for a staff that might have to win a national championship to keep their jobs, at least in the eyes of some people in Columbus. That's the case.
On that topic, it's
I know. I felt the same way. People wanted Ryan Day gone. I said, no. I think Ryan Day's pretty good. I think Chip Kelly's pretty good. I think Jim Knowles is really good. Well, what do you know? Those guys are really good. Newsflash. Guys that have been winning at college football for a long time are indeed very good. Who could have foreseen, Brian?
The only thing left that I'll say is Oregon, and I'll get into this more when I join your show soon enough, is the most popular team in college football recruiting right now by a pretty big margin based on my intel face-to-face conversations.
Yay.
Well, they're going to have more talent moving forward than what they did.
Yeah.
So it's this won't help, but nonetheless, they're so much more popular than people know. It's going to pay dividends for years to come.
The helmets look cool.
Their helmets were pretty nasty tonight.
They
were pretty nasty.
There was some online chatter about the uniforms not looking good. And I was like, what are we
based
talking
on
about?
What?
I don't know. That's what I couldn't figure out.
I'm a cynic.
I feel like it just comes from the crowd that always want to criticize something or always want to criticize Oregon's uniforms. And, against Washington in the Big Ten championship game, they wore a lot of black. And so the criticism, well, you're not wearing enough of your team color. So then they go with a green jersey and green wings on the helmet. That green looks terrible. I don't think we can win here.
That's the guy that I'm done with. I'm done.
The space age helmets that reflect the San Gabriels are great. But it's just sad that iconic shot of the stealth bomber flying over the Rose Bowl before kickoff now belongs to the Twitter account, Photos That Precede Unfortunate Events.
That's
sad.
It fits in that category.
It's sad that that's where we are. Oh man.
If it makes you feel any better, Ohio State.
It doesn't. It does nothing. No, I didn't hear what you said. Okay, hold on. That was rude. Okay, what were you saying?
I'm saying Ohio State's going to win the national title. It's not like you lost to a team that's going to go, 5-7 or something. Barring something, now Ohio State's civil. They are weird. It wouldn't shock me if they bet an egg against somebody.
I'm just thinking about whether that makes me feel better. The answer is no.
I'd rather get beat by the team that wins the title compared to somebody that, like, if Texas would have lost today, they should have, to Arizona State, that's not acceptable because that talent disparity is pretty big. But they came with, depending on how that call, if they got that targeting call right there at the end of regulation, went Arizona State's way, they're in field goal range.
That was a bunch of crap.
That's a whole other subject, and I'm sure
that was a bunch of crap.
But anyway,
at the same time, 4th and 13.
Yeah, you shouldn't have.
Great chess match moment, by the way. I'm sure you saw it. If everyone else didn't, in the ASU Texas game, 4th and 13, Arizona State shows cover 0, and I mean you could bluff that look, but on 4th and 13, you have to get your receivers have to have time to get down the field. Quinn Ewers, in a stroke of veteran quarterback brilliance, goes out there and checks to a max protection. So they pick up the 0 blitz, and then he gets his star receiver one-on-one in the middle of the field.
And he smoked him.
Yep, absolutely toasted it. Like that SNL skit with Melissa McCarthy where she's the coach berating players because of the Rutgers guy who did that and got fired. And she throws a toaster at a player. And then Bill Hader asked her, why would you throw a toaster at a player? And she goes, because when someone blows by you, you're toast. And when you are toast, you get hit with a toaster.
I'm not going to comment on that. But.
Brian's been hanging out with me for just over an hour now, and he's about ready to wrap it up. We'll wrap it there. Any closing thoughts there, Brian, on that? The whole not the SNL skit, which is very funny, by the way. I'll just point that out. Any final thoughts that we didn't air in the last hour? That was a quick hour.
To be honest with you, I think it's just from the fact you're punch drunk, but that's another topic. So, I mean, you look off, to be quite honest. But anyway,
I'm not mad. I'm disappointed.
Oh, that's fair. I know a certain quarterback that's the backup at Oregon. He's going to be really good. They got some really good players coming in. It's not like Oregon football is not going to be a top 10 program. So,
no, it is not. It is not. I got to tell you, I think I'm going to have a tough time selling that to some college football fans in the coming weeks. I'm going to try anyway.
But right now, the next 2 weeks, whatever you get is a bonus. You need to approach this from a realistic
I tell you what I'm looking forward to.
What's that?
Dana Altman's got Oregon basketball number 9 in the country, baby. Hoop season. Hoop season. Anything could happen in March. Oregon's got a Big Ten matchup with a top 20 Illinois team on Thursday. I'll react to that on Friday's show. We'll call it there. That's Brian Smith, Locked On Seminoles, our Locked On Recruiting Insider here at the network. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And yes, even in these trying times, as always, go Ducks.